We live in a world where people have value when they accomplish a certain amount of wealth, when they have a certain status in society, when they have a certain amount of power, when they have a degree of success. And we struggle, though our culture struggles to see the value of people who, for example, have disabilities, or people who are in a hospital bed, or people who are poor or powerless or unable to make their own way. But when we see this all as a grace gift from God, then we are joint recipients who view one another not as special or powerful or better. We view ourselves as we actually are. We are all recipients of incredible grace. And so we should view one another not based on our power or our influence or our morality or our code. We view each other as what we are. We are joint creations of God, receiving from Him meaning and purpose and value. So let's get started with the reality that creation is a gift of grace. If there was nothing but God, and God created, if there is a beginning, that means by definition that creation itself is not necessary. God doesn't need creation. God doesn't need us. God doesn't have unmet needs that we are to satisfy. God doesn't have a lack that we fill. God doesn't need the universe. The universe needs God. And so since He existed before it, it's a really important thing to just get your brain around this idea. None of this is necessary. God chose it, designed it, created it. Last week we talked about that everything is personal to God because He's person. He revealed that to us prior to creation. But because He's a person, everything is personal to Him. It's hand-chosen. It's carefully designed. And when you think about creation itself, it's just stunning, all the thought and creativity and beauty and symmetry and systems that all go into it, but none of it is necessary. God doesn't need it. That means then that what He did was He gave a gift of creation, and He gave the gift to His creation, and we should receive that gift as a gift of grace. It turns out that God's first act of grace is not the forgiveness of your sin, it's the fact that we even exist. He chose to create everything that we see, everything that is, and He chose to create us. Now, that leads to a lot of things we should understand. First of all, we are recipients, not owners. And so this is a big deal because you think, well, this all sounds like, are we in kids' church with fundamental Bible stories? But here's the reality. If God didn't make it all, then He's just one of the citizens of this whole thing like we are. And that means that sin, as viewed as an offense against God, makes no sense. It only makes sense if He's the God who made it all. And so if He's just a participant in creation and He was created with creation, or He's an invention of our own imaginations or our own desires, then the idea of sin against God makes no sense. And if that makes no sense, then the idea of salvation makes no sense. And we can throw really the whole Bible away. So this is a foundational reality that, as I mentioned earlier, really helps us understand all of Scripture and all of human history. This didn't need to be, and God, by His grace, created it. Now, if we are recipients, that means a lot of things. What do recipients of gifts normally do? They receive the gift with gratitude and with thanksgiving. They certainly don't believe they earned the gift or that the gift is their own creation or the outcome of their production. They receive it. They give thanks. They recognize it is not theirs to begin with. It was a gift. And so when you think about creation as an expression of God's grace, it's a gift of grace that we even exist, it really changes how you look at everything. For example, because I am a gift, my existence is a gift from God. I don't need to go create my purpose in this world. I need to receive it from the one who made me. The fact that I'm a gift from God, and all of this is a gift from God, means that I don't have to earn my value. My value was given to me by the God who chose to create me, and I don't have to strive and earn and gather and prove that I have value because the God who created me as a gift and gave this to me declares I have value because he chose to make me. We live in a world where people have value when they accomplish a certain amount of wealth, when they have a certain status in society, when they have a certain amount of power, when they have a degree of success. And we struggle, though our culture struggles to see the value of people who, for example, have disabilities, or people who are in a hospital bed, or people who are poor or powerless or unable to make their own way. But when we see this all as a grace gift from God, then we are joint recipients who view one another not as special or powerful or better. We view ourselves as we actually are. We are all recipients of incredible grace. And so we should view one another not based on our power or our influence or our morality or our code. We view each other as what we are. We are joint creations of God, receiving from him meaning and purpose and value. And whatever I have, I did not create. I received it as part of that gift. And so I can't boast, I can't brag, I can't compare, because everything I've got is entirely a gift of grace, and everything you have is a gift of grace, and God is gracious. I want to read you a quote from a guy I've really come to like, and his name is Christopher Watkin. Here's what he says. In a world in which everything is a contract, a deal struck for personal benefit, what deal can we strike with God when he gives us everything we have? The Bible's picture of human beings is not as wheelers and dealers in the corporate boardroom, signing contracts with the gods or ultimate reality in order to get ahead. Instead, we are joyful children on Christmas morning, receiving unexpectedly lavish gifts from loving parents. Free gifts, not contractual obligation, is at the heart of the Bible's picture of reality, just as it is at the heart of the Bible's picture of redemption. If this principle is followed through, it yields a world in which the poor, the weak, the aged are not cast aside because they have nothing to put on the table in the great business deal of life, but they are cared for and honored. God gives freely to those who cannot stand on their own 2 feet, those who cannot cut a deal with him. We are gifts to one another because we are gifts of God, and all of it was optional. It's really humbling. Creation and understanding the reality that God made it all is a salve on the arrogance of humanism, because we think that we make the world and we grow the world and we are purpose. Carl Sagan said, there is the universe, and that's all there is, that's all there ever has been, and that's all there ever will be. So for him, the great circle is one big circle, the universe. You happen to be in it by some collision of atoms. The universe, that's all there is, that's all there ever has been, and that's all there ever will be. But the Bible says there is God, who out of his grace, not out of necessity, not out of a need, not out of a wound, by his grace created the universe, which is a smaller reality subjugated to the big reality of God. And this is essential for us to find our way in the world. If you forget that there is a God who is sovereign and powerful, who does not need us, there are no gifts I can give to God that he is deficient in. He already owns all my treasure. He already owns the days of my life. He already owns everything I'll ever do or participate in or accomplish. He already owns it all. What can I give him? The answer is nothing except gratitude. And so this is a really important starting place. And as I thought about this all week long, just the reality that none of this needed to be, all of it is grace, and that I am a recipient with you. We are recipients of the great grace and love of God. I don't have to go earn love. Love is gifted to me by the God of all grace, who made me to love me. What an amazing reality. And it humbles us all to a level playing field. None of us is better than the other. We have different gifts for sure. And those gifts accomplish different degrees of things for sure. But they are all gifts. None of us have produced those on our own. None of us have earned them. We are children on Christmas morning receiving gifts from a gracious God. Now, here's what's cool. Not only is everything a gracious gift of God and he's gracious, but he is extravagant. When you look at creation, you realize that God is not a minimalist. I mean, you look at the mountains. I drove in this morning. I chose a different Starbucks for my morning routine. And so I came up Arapahoe Road, which I love Arapahoe Road, particularly when the mountains are snow-capped and it's sunny. Because as you come up Arapahoe Road, it looks like the Front Range is just massive right there in front of you. He didn't have to do that. And you think of all the extravagance of God's creation. He's abundantly generous. The extravagance of his beauty and his goodness. And when you look at the complexities of creation, it's kind of like God is this combination of a mathematician with a pocket protector making precise calculations about how everything's going to work, and some kind of hippie in a tie-dye shirt who's painting a beautiful picture. And he's all of that because he chooses this extravagance with which to create. Think of this. Why have 1,000 species on the earth when you can have somewhere between 2 and 5 million? Why have a handful of stars in the sky when you can have 600 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and astronomers estimate there are 2 trillion more galaxies? What? Why make the world black and white when you can give the human eye the ability to distinguish between 5 and 7 million colors? Why make food for sustenance that's boring and sex just for procreation when you can make both of those a really good time? I love that about God. What an why all the waste? Why all the extravagance? Because it's cool. Because God says, I am a gracious, extravagant God. People misunderstand God when they view him as stingy or demanding or unhappy. He is the great, generous creator who didn't need any of this and still doesn't. But he creates us with gifts and abundance and beauty and awe, discoveries forever that will never bore us. I can't even imagine what heaven's going to be like when you see how amazing this is. And don't miss the words in Genesis 1, verse 2. Now the earth was formless and empty. The earth was formless and empty. God created the heavens and the earth was formless and empty. Those words in Hebrew are tohu wabahu. Okay, this is a really interesting thing because Hebrew scholars love this phrase. Tahu wabahu, okay, or tohu wabahu. I don't know how to speak Hebrew. If you do, you're thinking I'm butchering the pronunciation of this. I don't care. This is a cool thing. The earth was tohu wabahu. It was formless and empty. And what does God do? He begins to speak. And he begins to speak. What an amazing thing that he chose speech. He could have just pointed. He could have thought. He could have used his hands. He speaks. And man, his word is going to be a powerful part of the whole story because he speaks. And he speaks over tohu wabahu. He speaks over formless and emptiness and creates with his words. Wow, get this. You go to Jeremiah chapter 3, and this was a time of great rebellion against God among his people. And Jeremiah says, I looked at the earth, and it was formless and empty. The earth was tohu wabahu again because of the rebellion of God's people. And I looked at the heavens, and their light was gone. I looked at the mountains, and they were quaking. At the hills, and they were swaying. I looked, and there were no people. Every bird in the sky had flown away. It looked, and the fruitful land was a desert. All of its towns lay in ruins. This is the dystopian fear of humanity. Why do we love movies like Mad Max and The Book of Eli and The Day After Tomorrow? We all fear that tohu wabohu is coming back, that it's going to collide and just become a dystopian, worthless, depressing landscape. Like this is all going to end very badly. We're obsessed with that idea, and we make songs and poems and books and music and movies about it. But here's the thing. Like Jeremiah, you may be in a season of your life where you look in your life and you see tohu wabohu. It's formless, it's empty. What I want you to know that we serve a God of extravagance. And he's not going to just speak to your life and give you a knot in a rope to hold on to till it's finally all over. He's going to speak life into your soul. This morning in my drive-in, I was listening to some Bible reading as I drove. And it was Jesus saying, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. If you're thirsty, come, drink of the waters of life. You who are poor, come and purchase food from God." This is the God of abundance. This is the God of extravagance. When you pray, don't just ask God for survival. Ask him for extravagance. Why? Because you're arrogant? Because you're needy? Because he's the God of extravagance. And to ask an extravagant God for a tiny gift, for a Band-Aid instead of a healing, is an insult to the God of grace and creativity and beauty, who loves to speak over emptiness and formless. Tohu wabohu. He just speaks and it transforms. What an extravagant God that we serve. I meant to read for you earlier, Acts chapter 17. I'm going to read it to you anyway because it's just too good. You got to hear this. 24 and 25. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. He does not live in temples built by human hands, and he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. God doesn't need you. God doesn't need the universe. God doesn't need anything. But he loves us, and he wants us to receive his grace, to receive his love, not to go out and go on a quest to discover the meaning of our life, but to receive from him the meaning of our life and to live it with joy and abundance and extravagance in grace. Now, some of you might hear in that sentence right there, health, wealth, and prosperity. And if you did, you heard it completely wrong. It's not that he wants you, he has no problem with your material possessions. He has problems with who's Lord of your life, and he has problems when generosity is not part of your blessing. He's got dreams for you, and he is a God of extravagance, but that extravagance is for the whole earth. And man, don't think small, don't ask small. When you are in tohu wabohu, call out to the God of extravagance and say, "Speak, O God, your word of extravagance over my life." Well, the third thing is that God is enough. And I like that phrase, God is enough, but it comes out of the principle that on day 7, God rested. Now, why did he rest? Was he tired? 6 days of creation, look at all this. Was he tired? Was his throat a little scratchy from all of the speaking and commanding and affirming that it was good? Were his arms tired from making man out of the dust of the earth and breathing into his nostrils the breath of life? No, we know God was not tired. We know that God was not exhausted. We know that God's not lazy. Why does he rest and then bless the day of rest and say, this is a holy day? Rest is a holy thing. Why does he do that? To calibrate us to the constant reminder that this world is not about achievement. It's not about accomplishment. It's not about procurement of wealth. It is not about being successful. It's not about any of that. It's about God. Rest, this is the thought that I love. Rest is a political statement of resistance. God gives us all this extravagance and he gives us all these gifts. And here's what he knows. You might lose yourself in there. You might lose yourself in all these gifts and in all this creativity because he did create us in his image, which is to say we have creative powers too. And we have the ability to form and to invest and to participate. That we have stewardship responsibilities, rule over. We're going to talk about all this next week as we talk about what is a human and what do we know, what does the Bible say a human is, and how should we understand humanity from God's word. That'll be next week. But here's the thing. He knows that it's going to be super easy for you to either lose yourself in your abundance and your success and your value coming from others and from stuff. And he also knows how easy it is for you to think that you're nothing because you have failure and pain and loss. And what does he call you to do to resist all of that, to rebel against that temptation? Rest. He says, I want you to take a day and I want you to rest. The Jewish farmers and ranchers would outproduce the pagans when they rested one day a week. Chick-fil-A does the same thing right now in the fast food world. You can look at, if you research profit margins and sales of fast food restaurants, Chick-fil-A opening 6 days a week is outperforming most chains that operate 7 days a week. They believe, the Cathy family believes in the principle of rest, and to declare with their business, to declare with their money, to declare with their time that everything's a gift from God and I'm going to rest in him. And it's a resistance to the temptation to keep fighting and earning and clawing and scratching. Because what you're tempted to believe is, I have to work. And what God shouts through the created beauty and abundance of things is, I got you. I got you. And rest is a declaration to your own soul and to the world around you. God has got me. What I love, you go to Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, and you see how the New Testament understanding of Sabbath is that you're allowed to have that 24/7, 365. There is a Sabbath rest for the people of God in the person of Jesus. And we don't have to strive. We don't have to claw. We don't have to wow God with our super awesome, pure spirituality and morality. We rest in the abundance of his love and his meaning and his grace and his goodness. And everything we do with our hands and feet and our bodies is a gift back to God of worship. It is not about earning. It's not about establishing value. It's not about comparing with other people. It's about saying, man, God, you're awesome. Let me see what I can do with this thing you've given me. But it doesn't define me, and it's not what matters. What matters is you. Man, if you can find that spot, can you just feel the anxiety leave your mind as you rest in that? Your God is an abundant, extravagant, gracious God, and he is enough. He's enough. I believe, I've been saying this for probably 25 years of my life. The greatest need you have, no matter what circumstance you face right now, the greatest need you have is and always will be more of Jesus. I need more of Jesus. That's how you find your way. Why? Because you're reconnecting to the origin of everything, to the beginning. And the beginning is a person. The beginning is God. This is really important as we navigate our culturally chaotic world, because how do you find stability when the world loses its mind? How do you remain gracious when people who believe completely different of this, that they believe there is no creator, all of this is the universe, that's all there is, that's all there was, that's all there ever will be? How do you have patience in those conversations? How do you extend grace? You understand that the people you're dealing with are not enemies of God. They are gifts from God, created by God in the image of God. And our mission is to be with God, to do the work of God, in the presence of God, in the place that God made, to just keep declaring his goodness, his grace, his love, and his power. What an awesome thing. So here's how I want you to respond today. Response number one, receive the entire world and your place in it as a gift of grace from God, and rest gratefully. I know some of the stories going on in your lives. I know the stories going on in the lives of my family, my kids and grandkids. We know the stories going on around us that make it difficult to rest. But rest is a declaration. God's got it all. He's got me. He's got it all. Now, we are not passive. Even though we're recipients, we're not passive. But neither do we create value, neither do we create meaning, create purpose, create love. We rest in it and we receive it and we live out of it. And that's a powerful difference. So your first response today, I'm going to give you a chance here. The team is going to do a song for you that I'm going to invite you to observe and participate at the soul level from your seat. But receive all of God's creation as the gift that it is and rest gratefully. Number 2 response is always about your oikos. If you're new to Summit Church, oikos is the Greek New Testament term for your extended household. And there's dozens of examples, really not just in the New Testament, but throughout the entire scriptures, that God operates in the lives of people through the other people he's already put in their lives. And this is the way we would summarize that. God has already strategically and supernaturally placed somewhere between 8 and 15 people around your life that don't know him. And your invitation is to reveal Jesus to them. This week, I want you to pay attention to your oikos, the people that God has put around you. And I want you to extend grace to them with generosity and gratitude. So find a way. Notice what's going on in the lives of the people around you this week and be a bringer of God's grace, your own gratitude, and their value because they are a gift from God as well.